Alright, so about a year later, I've returned to the Team Ninja Gaiden trilogy with Black 2, the remake that came out last year in 2025. And man, putting aside visuals, which are obviously a big step up, the combat here is such a massive improvement. The big thing here is the dismemberment, which my understanding too is that it was in since the original two, and it just adds so much. Such a great idea, so well executed, adds, whole layer of strategy with weakened enemies who might, try to have a bit of a self-destructive attack out of desperation. And if you do a heavy attack while they're, missing a limb, you get that execution and a lot of, different animations, particularly for reuse different weapons. And it's so satisfying. I guess, the same way a Mortal Kombat fatality can be really satisfying. And to me, it just helps the game really stand out. I'm not saying something like this is completely unheard of, but it's not something that every game like this does, and does this well, as opposed to the first Ninja Gaiden, where it's like, yeah, I can imagine just about any other game in the genre playing like this. And just overall not being as fun or as much of a standout. And you have a lot of different weapons to mess around with here and some side characters. So a lot of variety. Granted, even now, I don't feel like any of the weapons really do anything too crazily different from each other. I feel like that's part of the reason to where I honestly don't remember what's new or returning from the first game, just because I feel like they can all fit in both of them without really pushing anything. But there's enough there with different, hitboxes and timing and that sort of thing. Different, combos, many of which are locked behind weapon upgrades, but they're a bit more reasonable than I remember them being. I had, by the end of the game, I think all but one or two fully upgraded. I guess it would have been nice if they gave, a little more attention to what combos you unlocked for each weapon upgrade. Other than that, I do believe there was less Nepo, or whatever it's called, this time around. I'm pretty sure there was more than 4 last time. But overall, not a super big deal. And even with all of that being said, I like all the different, animations and stuff that they probably had to do for limb dismemberment and executions, and maybe having it, work a little bit into the environment around you. Like, I think it's, more than acceptable if certain things, may have been condensed or don't have their own big new selling point. One thing I will say that the first game did better was I do miss the Hydracobus. I had to look up what that enemy was, but it was like a mini boss that was recurring in the first game, and that was one of 2 really standout enemies from that game. It was just so satisfying with that enemy to go back, maybe a little more leveled up, a little more sort of experienced with this enemy and everything that the game throws at you. And it was one of the most, satisfying enemies to progress through. And unfortunately, I think they're only in the first game. Although you did have the ghost fish return, which I definitely remember them. They were quite the pain in the ass. Couldn't you use shurikens to defeat them in the first game? I was pretty sure you could, but then you can't here. But then I sort of figured out that just sort of spamming your light attacks kind of takes care of them. And you do have a few other now lighter enemies to sort of take on too. Although maybe some of them were in the first game. I don't remember too well. I mainly just remember the bonefish and the bats from the first one. I should have noted earlier, but this is all the easy mode experience. Did definitely feel like I didn't need the hero mode thing this time around, which is still a system I'm a little mixed on. where basically if you run out of health, you use a weapon that makes you indestructible. And this time, because I thought last time you didn't heal after, but I think this time you do. I don't know. I do kind of like the insurance of maybe having something that automatically heals if you run out your health bar without, paying too close attention to it. It's like considering there's, not really as standout indicators as there may be in some other games, like, the screen getting bloody or blacked out a bit, or, your health bar being a bit, bigger or more centered somewhere or something like that. But yeah, most of the time after I got the hero mode or whatever, I would just use a healing item, except, maybe some of the later bosses when things were really ramping up. I had a particularly hard time with the Blood Fiend. One thing I will say that I feel like the Ninja Gaiden games need more of an in-between of how the first game and the second game approached platforming. There's less here, and maybe I should be careful what I wish for, because the platforming was some of the most frustrating part of the first game, but it's done a lot better here, and I just kind of wish there was more of it, especially, just in between some combat and that. And actually, unfortunately, I don't know how the fourth game does, but I think I have heard that the third game goes even deeper away from the platforming and more into the combat, which is disappointing, but, I'll still check it out. I already have it when I got the Master Collection anyway. Do plan to pick up 4, though, eventually when it's on a better sale. The other thing, though, with platforming that I will say is that keyboard and mouse did not work well with wall running. I eventually wound up switching to a gamepad because you kind of just have to be at an angle, and it's just seamless on a controller, but more, frustrating when you don't have that dedicated thumbstick for it. But, I guess I kind of get it. That's sort of how the original game was built. Speaking of which, I have played, some Koei Tecmo remakes before. I'm thinking of, some of the Fatal Frame games in particular. And this game, like I said, it looks great, obviously, in Unreal. But it also wasn't because I remember with Fatal Frame, there were certain areas that just seemed off, like they may have not have been upscaled enough to really fit in with some of the other upscaled elements. Here, this was never an issue. The whole game, I feel like, looked fantastic. Although, once again, that's more of icing on the cake as opposed to a core concern. I'm sure if, the gameplay was about the same, I would have been fine playing Sigma 2. I will say, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I feel like some of the music and environments earlier in the game were a little better. I particularly liked some of the historical areas, just sort of seeming them overrun by demons and evil ninja and, just going in and slicing and dicing and saving the day there. I feel like, especially coming off, I played Devil May Cry 5 right before this too, and I felt like some of the environments got, kind of samey. Here, it was definitely a stronger suit. And I think the first game did have, a couple standout places too, but I feel like this one, improved upon that. Obviously, in the background footage here, I'm going through some tag challenges. Obviously, once again, not the best Ninja Gaiden player, but the one thing I like that they did here that I don't believe Sigma 1 did, and maybe, the other Sigma doesn't do either. I don't know if it's a newer thing, but they let you go through practice mode with most, if not all, of the tag challenges unlocked, which I feel is great. Obviously, like the first set I completely cleared. The second set I had a majority cleared. The third set, I didn't clear any, but there were several I was pretty close to clearing. Fourth and fifth, I got my ass completely handed to me. But it was still fun to, sort of see what they throw at you and to even have more of an appreciation and a reminder that, hey, your experience in this game is a lot different than the people playing on these higher difficulties. I have no idea what goes into, clearing some of those challenges. They seem absolutely near impossible, nuts to me. I should, maybe look up some gameplay of them at some point. Just out of sheer curiosity. I feel like the tag element too, adding, some multiplayer. Hopefully there was, some online back in the day, or hopefully now with it. Just, a lot of fun, a nice way to sort of shake things up a little bit from main game campaign. And just, great idea. Not sure when in the series it was implemented. Sigma 1 may have even had them too, but maybe because I didn't get to, experience as many of those challenges, it didn't stand out as much. But yeah, high recommend if you can get it for the right price. Because I can kind of get, because these are shorter games. I feel like, just character action games are like that in general. I think both this and, like I said, I finished Devil May Cry 5 recently. They were like 15 hours. So, I mean, if you're really into it and you're going to really try to master it, I feel like the full 60, 70 is probably worth it. But if you're sort of more casual, just going to kind of play through it, I would say, more in the $30, $40 range. It's probably a bit more fair. And if you're just going to kind of just do main campaign and not really go looking for hidden collectibles or, get the most out of it, then maybe you can argue even less than that. But yeah, also speaking of the background footage, see, I was a little bummed out because I think this is the last time Rachel's playable. I'll admit I didn't like her playability, just the play style as much in 1, but I was liking her a bit more here. The big heavy style there, hammer. So that's, a little disappointing. I guess she gets replaced with Kasumi. I don't know. Maybe she just wasn't for good Nintendo boys and girls, because I think, didn't Nintendo, sort of help publish 3, or maybe it was just the 1 version. I don't remember. But still, overall, the cut, I just don't know if it makes a lot of sense considering they brought everyone else back. But at the same time, I know I'm playing in sort of a weird order with remakes, and that maybe, 3 was completely from the ground up, and maybe just the other stuff was added later on, and I don't know. The DOA characters were a higher priority, and Momiji was more popular. They wanted to flesh her out more. I don't know the story there, but one of those, damn, I was just getting a decent hold of her gameplay there. Kind of interesting in going back to Dead or Alive. I don't know as many of how, the different weapons are sort of referenced and incorporated in all the characters who have been playable in Ninja Gaiden in that series. But, all of that is for a different time. As I go to attack Ryu, thinking he's one of the enemy ninjas in the background. Blended in a little there, and well, he hikes with the background at all the, black with the snow, and Rachel in probably the worst outfit for the snow. But hey, it's all fun, fictional ridiculousness that all has its own charm to it.